New US-led airstrikes against Daesh fighters failed to stop the group from pressing their assault on a strategic Syrian town near the Turkish border. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu sets off for New York for the UN General Assembly as he attacks both the Palestinian and Iranian president's speeches at the event. And rescuers in Japan have found at least 31 presumed dead people near the peak of an erupting volcano. Good afternoon, I'm Shachar Peled. You're watching i24 News. Now to our top story. US-led airstrikes continue to occur in parts of Iraq and Syria in order to wrestle control of towns from Daesh fighters. But recent strikes have failed to stop the group from pressing their assault in Syrian towns near the Turkish border. i24 News reporter Danny Swibel has the latest.
New U.S.-led airstrikes against Daesh on Saturday failed to stop the Islamist group from pressing their assault on a strategic town near the Turkish border, hitting it with shellfire for the first time. The airstrikes destroyed a Daesh building and two armed vehicles near the border of Kobani, which has been under insurgent attacks for the last 10 days. These reports came as British warplanes returned to base following a sortie over Iraq without having engaged targets. It was the Royal Air Force's first mission after Parliament authorized strikes against Islamic State militants there.
In front of us, and we need to face up to it.
After much discussion of the Islamic State at the UN General Assembly, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also weighed in on airstrikes against Daesh. Lavrov had on Friday questioned the legality of the military action taking place without Syria's approval.
From the very beginning of the Arab Spring, Russia urged to not leave Syria to extremists and to establish a united front to counter the growing terrorist threat. We warned against the temptation to make allies with almost anybody who proclaimed themselves an enemy of Bashar al-Assad, be it Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra, and others seeking the change of regime, including Islamic State, which today is the focus of our attention. As the saying goes, better late than never.
It is uncertain when these strikes will cease, and if in fact they are able to turn the tide of the battle against IS without a land operation to take back control.
And earlier today, we spoke with Haaretz senior security analyst Amir Oren on the ongoing Western air fight versus Daesh in Syria and Iraq.
Well, the most important thing is that the West, headed by President Obama, is back on the offensive. Rather than bracing itself for whatever hits ISIL or other groups like Khorasan may intend to perform on its own home ground, Obama and other leaders are pinpointing their attacks within Iraq and Syria, and apparently are blocking, at least partly, the advance of these groups. They themselves are candid enough in saying that it may take many months, perhaps a year, to train and prepare those so-called boots on the ground, which are not going to be American, British, or any other Western powers, but rather Kurdish and other indigenous fighters. So it's going to be a long fight, but at least the tide has stopped, if not turned.
And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took off for New York this morning. Netanyahu is set to speak at the General Assembly on Monday and meet with US President Obama on Wednesday. A short while ago, I spoke with our diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev on what we can expect from Netanyahu's UN speech.
For 2 days after a widely denounced speech by the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and now the Israeli Prime Minister is on his way for his speech of his own tomorrow evening at the UNGA. And Netanyahu knows the UN for more than 30 years. He actually started his political and diplomatical career there. So he always refers to the UN as a house of lies and a house of darkness. For more than 30 years, this is how he has been referring to the UN. And this is a motive we hear today, just before he gets gets on the flight. He again says it's a similar line. He says every year that he's going to the UN to deflect the lies and deflect the incitement. This year, he's talking specifically about the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, who on Friday actually blamed Israel for genocide in Gaza, as we mentioned, a widely denounced speech not only in Israel but also in Washington. And Hassan Rouhani, the Iranian president, from Netanyahu's point of view, deceiving the West. So there are three basic main motives that will be in Netanyahu's speech. One is, of course, Islamic extremism and the Daesh threat, something that Netanyahu will not miss out on. He understands this is the main issue that is catching global attention these days, but also he will answer Abbas's speech from Friday, in which he demanded an end to Israeli occupation. And of course, he will use the podium to warn against the Iranian nuclear threat, and specifically from concessions that the West might make towards the Iranian nuclear program in the midst of the ISIS coalition, the IS-Daesh coalition. That is the three topics that will be in Netanyahu's speech. Now is actually arriving a week late, a week after 140 world leaders have already gathered in New York to open the General Assembly. That is because of the Jewish New Year holiday. So he doesn't have a lot of high-level meetings, but he will be meeting on Tuesday. He will be meeting the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and he will be having his first meeting with the Indian Prime Minister, the new Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. But of course, the most important meeting will be on Wednesday in Washington, D.C. with the U.S. President Barack Obama. It's the first meeting they've had in 7 months, and during that time there has been quite a lot of tensions between Israel and the U.S., so that is probably going to be the most interesting meeting, and that is the one everyone is waiting for.
First time after the 50-day hostilities.
First time after the 50-day hostilities, which did bring a lot of tensions to the Israel-U.S. relationship.
Now, as Prime Minister Netanyahu delivered harsh words towards Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, Israeli President Reuven Rivlin delivered on Saturday a conciliatory message at a particularly difficult juncture in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, saying that Jews and Arabs were meant to live side by side. In an interview to Israeli television channels, the president was quoted as saying, "I believe that it's not that Jews and Arabs were forced together by chance, but that they are destined to live side by side." And the UN envoy to Yemen said that the final part of a peace deal with the government was signed by Yemen's Houthi Shia rebels on Saturday, days after taking control of much of the capital Sana'a. The deal signed is an extension of the UN-brokered agreement signed early on Monday and is expected to put an end to weeks of ongoing violence. Under the latest agreement, the rebels must stop all acts of violence.
I stress that all political parties should abide strictly and immediately to the terms of the agreement in order to lift the country out of the current crisis. I will continue to monitor any violations by any party of the agreement, and the United Nations will provide all necessary technical and political support to assist the implementation of this agreement. And I'm also ready to denounce any deviations from what has been agreed upon.
And in Hong Kong, leader Leung Chun-ying said on Sunday that the government will launch a new round of consultations on electoral reform shortly, following a week of violent clashes between police and pro-democracy activists calling for greater freedoms. Leung was speaking as police barricaded city streets to block in thousands of pro-democracy demonstrators surrounding the government headquarters after they accelerated a plan to shut down the heart of the global financial hub. He did not provide a time frame for consultations. It was his first address to protesters since students launched a demonstration on Monday to call for greater democracy and demand he meet them to discuss electoral reforms. And staying in Southeast Asia, a Japanese police official says rescuers have found more than 31 unconscious bodies believed to be dead near the peak of an erupting volcano. Mount Ontake in central Japan erupted shortly before noon Saturday, spewing large white plumes of gas and ash high into the sky and blanketing the surrounding area in ash. About 250 people were initially trapped on the slopes, but most made their way down by Saturday night. And that's all the time we have for now. You can join us again in 20 minutes and check us out on our Facebook and Twitter pages, and log on to our website, i24news.tv, where you can see our broadcasts in 3 languages, English, French and Arabic. That's all for now. Thank you very much for watching.